cooling off as drama in Washington heats up. There is progress on averting a government shutdown, but the future of President Biden's infrastructure, reconciliation bills, and the debt ceiling remain in the balance. Joining us now for an exclusive interview, former Council of Economic Advisors Chair Jason Furman. I guess it's nothing new in Washington, but what we really are seeing, Jason, the tensions exposed in the Democratic Party, the moderates holding up some bills, the progressives holding up bills. How do you expect this to play out as it relates to two pillars of the Biden administration's economic agenda?
Yeah, I think it was Winston Churchill who said something to the effect of Americans do the right thing after they've exhausted all the alternatives. That's certainly true about Congress. They go through lots and lots of phases of drama. But at the end, I think on most of this, they're going to end up in a sensible place. We're seeing that with funding the government. I think things are going to pass in the infrastructure and reconciliation bill, some which way as well.
Really? With Senator Manchin saying $1.5 trillion is his upper limit? It's about $2 trillion short?
Oh, there's a large spread there. There's a lot they're going to need to work through to get there. It's definitely not guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed when you need 100% of one party and you don't have any of the other party. Even as $1.5 trillion leaves some room, though. How do you count a tax cut, for example? A lot of the environmental provisions, a lot of the provisions for children are actually tax cuts. If they count on the tax side of the ledger, that would enable more spending and not count against the 1.5 trillion.
Jason, excuse me one
gross.
moment, because great, we've got you here to react to what is some breaking news crossing right now on the government funding bill, which Elon has for us. Elon?
Well, Wilfred, the House now has the votes it needs to fund the government through December the 3rd. That vote is still ongoing on the floor, but the current tally is about 221 in favor, well above the level needed to clear this bill. Now, the Senate passed a version of this bill earlier today, so after this vote is done, it would go to the president for his signature, allowing Washington to avoid a government shutdown at midnight tonight, as the House now has the votes it needs in order to pass the government funding bill. Back over to you.
Elon, thanks so much for that. Jason, I guess that sort of kind of proves your point on one of these two big parts, which is that they'll get there in the end.
Yeah, and I'm glad they did this through December. I'd much rather see them work through regular order to pass appropriations bills where they make decisions. Let's spend more in this area, let's spend that less in that area. Autopilot for 2.5 months is less than ideal, but it's a lot better than the alternative of a government shutdown. The debt limit is the next one. We may just have 2 weeks to deal with that, possibly a little bit more wiggle room. But, I think that'll be another one where they'll, some which way figure out how to get through it.
You think we should get rid of the debt limit, right? You've written about this. Steve reminded us at the top of the hour after some of the drama that we saw last time in 2011, which led to the downgrade of U.S. government debt. Why do we go through this time and time again?
Yeah, I don't know why we do. No other country has a debt limit. There are fiscal crises around the world, but they're always when people no longer want to lend to your government. The United States would be unique in having a crisis because the government no longer was willing to borrow. I was against the debt limit when President Trump was in office. I urged the Democrats to vote for raising the debt limit when Trump was president, and I think the Republicans should do the same now. I think we should get rid of it. You want to raise it by, $1 Google dollars. That's one with 100 zeros. That would be fine too. We could then come back in a million years to the issue.
I didn't know that number. That's one to remember. Jason, want to pivot and talk, as we pivot to inflation. I mean, we haven't got that level of inflation, obviously. But to what level do you think that it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy when it does persist now for many months, not just a few months, and at quite pronounced levels? And is it a concern to you?
I think inflation is going to be more persistent than what the Fed is counting on. It'll certainly come down from its recent white-hot levels, but I see it stabilizing closer to 3% than the 2% that the Fed is counting on. I think a lot of ingenuity has gone into pointing out all the transitory components of inflation, like used car prices. Less has gone into the shoes that have yet to drop: shelter inflation, medical prices, especially in the CPI, wages passing through to prices, and the continued fiscal support the economy is receiving. I think all of that adds up to inflation well above what we've been used to historically.
So if you think that, Jason, and you also think that these two bills are going to pass, that's trillions of more dollars potentially going into the system. What do they do to the inflation and economic picture in the U.S.?
I think on the medium term, it's imperceptible. The bills will be largely paid for, especially the reconciliation bill. The money's spread out over time. They increase the productive capacity of the economy. If somehow they generated inflationary pressures, which I don't expect, the Fed would have time to deal with them. So there's a big difference between the legislation they're talking about now and what happened in March, when trillions of dollars were poured into the economy with almost no notice. The March one was very hard for the Fed to do anything about. This time, if it needs to, it can.